We've had a snorter of a RAJAR result, we have to say. We're rather pleased about it, not least because an awful lot of people seem to have deserted the BBC and the wokeocracy that I've just invented as a word to describe all of these wokeists in various different parts of Britain. They simply fed up with the Today programme, simply fed up with Radio 4 in particular, and all of the stuff that they spout on about endlessly, and they'd rather have the real truth and nothing but the truth here at TalkTV, of course. And who better to ask about that and to ask about the wokeocracy than Rod Liddle, columnist at the Sunday Times, who's every Thursday now joining us for his take on the way things are. Rod, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome back.
Good afternoon to you, Mike. Nice to hear you. Nice to hear your voice. And good news about the BBC as well.
Isn't it just? Yeah, I mean, it might take a while, but we'll get them in the end. Wokeocracy is a word I invented just this morning, which I think is quite good. I'm not sure whether it has a silent E or we take the E out, but wokeocracy sort of seems to me to describe the state of this country, that if we're not careful, it will become. I think we're fighting back, and we're valiantly fighting back. But there's an awful lot of wokery to fight, isn't there?
Yeah, you don't need the E. You're quite right. I called it a tossocracy, but I've worked for the BBC, Mike. You know,
and you live to tell the tale.
Live to tell the tale. Yeah, I mean, do you know? I heard a drama on Radio 4 the other week, about a week ago, and it was really interesting. But that's it. Every time I turn on Radio 4. It is a woman whining about something, or they're getting down with the boys in the hood, because that, of course, is Radio 4's staple audience.
Yes,
a 19-year-old African Caribbean kid in Harlesden. That's who Radio 4 really want to attract.
Exactly. I mean, it's this sort of Archbishop Welbyisation of the world, isn't it?
Yes, it is, but people have a go at the news, and rightly sometimes. And I think the World at One is a particular offender, more so than the Today programme, which at least has Justin Webb on it sometimes. But it's the other programmes. It's every other programme is infested with this kind of moronic ideology, where the only things that matter are race and gender, and what a despicable history Britain has. And it must turn people off in their droves. I suspect they'd even prefer to watch you, Mike.
Well, they do, and that's why we're doing so well. I mean, that's the good news. I mean, so there's every cloud has a silver lining. I mean, I was unfortunate enough to tune into the PM show one day as I was in the car, so I thought I'll just see what they're up to. And they were on location somewhere in Derby, at some kind of organic cheese farm. And you just thought, really? You know, there's people, you know, who are struggling to pay their bills. There's people who, you know, can't even afford cheese, as Anne Widdecombe has discovered this week. And here we are talking about the brilliance of an organic cheese farm that basically only sells to Fortnum & Masons and Harrods.
Yes, quite. Well, I don't know if you remember during the Brexit debate, in the lead up to Brexit, PM had this feature which they came back to once every week or so called Brexit Street. And what they did was find a street which had a lot of these absolutely ghastly people.
Yeah, racists.
The European Union. These racists. We're going back to Brexit Street for a few moments. Now tell me, Joe, why do you loathe foreigners?
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, the trouble is the sort of so-called cognoscenti believe all of that rubbish as well. You know, I went off to Normandy for a holiday and was sending various tweets out on social media, and people were going, oh, look, a Brexiteer who likes going to Europe. You know, what an idiot. You know, I'm sort of going, you know, it is actually possible to not be particularly in favour of a ludicrous, you know, unelected group of people who try to organise every aspect of your life, and actually going to a country where the food's rather nice and it's got quite a decent history.
Yeah, well, I always used to like explaining to Londoners why I didn't approve of the European Union. And I said, your entire city is built upon the exploitation of low-paid immigrant labour.
Yes. And it still is, by the way. It's getting worse.
And your basement kitchen was dug out by Polish labourers who were paid about a fifth of what they'd be paid in English. You know, and they don't like that, because that's the left-wing argument for opposing the European Union. And one way to sign up to.
Exactly. And, of course, Sir Keir Starmer is now making quite a lot of noise about being more involved with the European Union. I'm not sure I trust his version of events in which he says there is no case to rejoin, because he'll find a case to rejoin, won't he?
He may do. He may do. I mean, we have to watch this slippery little monkey very carefully. We really do. I think he's charismatic. I think he's done a good job since taking over the Conservative Party. I think it's good to see an Indian guy leading the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
It does say something about our country. It is an immediate riposte to all those black academics at Birmingham University who say that we're the most racist country on earth.
Well, of course, it really infuriates the leftists because they can't stand anybody who isn't white actually having conservative values.
Well, no, they refuse to accept that they're actually black or of colour.
Yeah.
And, Rishi's done very, very well. I still think his party is a party in search of a meaning. I don't think anybody knows really what the Conservative Party stands for at the moment.
Well, the biggest problem for Rishi Sunak and the Brexit conversation is that many of the people opposing Brexit are still in the Tory party.
Well, indeed. I mean, and that's the problem with the House of Commons. When we look at the House of Commons, I think it was something like 80% of members of the House of Commons were in favour of remaining in the EU. So it wasn't remotely representative, just as it's not representative on stuff like sex education in schools, on immigration and all those issues, which we in the SDP continue to fight about. But there's no accurate representation in the House of Commons or indeed in the mainstream media.
No, there really isn't. But let's talk about your column today, because you've led it with James Bond and the possible rewriting of Wussy Galore, which I rather liked as a headline.
yes, that's right. Yeah, I was struck by hearing Salman Rushdie talking about the rewriting of books, and quite rightly, some new James Bond books are coming out, and they've been altered to make them less interesting.
Yes.
It's what I think is the intention behind this. In other words, all the naughtiness has been cut out. If there was a woman who took her clothes off, she immediately got the chop from this book. The stripteases were removed. So it's not kind of James Bond. It's James Bond if it had been written by Richard Osman.
Yes. Or if it had been what do they call it? Sensitivity readers get their hands on these things.
Well, no, it's all done through sensitivity readers, and these are the people who are blocking lots of books from being published at all, lots of authors being published at all, because they may give offence to people. And Rushdie was right. He said, this is an assault on freedom of speech. And if anyone knows about freedom of speech, it is, of course, Salman Rushdie. He was stabbed last August, by a deranged jihadi nutjob. Yeah.
But also before that, lived under sort of the threat of death. And as you said, if you don't like a book, just don't read it.
If you don't like a book, don't read it. No, exactly. 34 years he's had. And it always struck me, and it struck me when I heard on, I think it was the BBC, which did a serialisation of Watership Down, in which suddenly the rabbit does were feminist campaigners. And Strawberry, the rabbit Strawberry, who I liked very much in the original novel, which when I read it when I was 13, 14, suddenly become transgendered. And if you want to write a book about feminist rabbits, write it.
Yeah.
Perhaps someone will watch it or read it.
Yeah.
But don't take a classic and mould it into your image. It's cheating,
But also, I'm not keen on even those originals, not from the rewriting of old books, but I saw one the other day, which was being sort of punted about on social media, and it was apparently a book designed for 3- and 4-year-olds, in which the title was, "I Love My Dad, He Used to Be My Mum."
Yes, well, but I don't agree with book burning, but I can make the occasional exception,
I mean,
But at least with that drivel, that poisonous drivel, you can choose not to buy it. If the BBC says it's putting on James Bond or putting on Watership Down, and what you actually watch is a travesty of what was James Bond or Watership Down, that is a cheat, and it's a rewriting of history, and it's wrong. You know, we shouldn't do that.
No.
We should allow these things to have the integrity with which they were made. And if the past offends some people, and I know it does, these are people who have no sense of history and are ruled eternally by the tyranny of now, then we should tell them to get stuffed and leave those works for people who can appreciate that the past was a different place.
Yes, because you can appreciate that the past was a different place. You don't have to be in favour of it. I mean, it was like the question of Johnny Depp I was asked the other day. You know, you got a standing ovation in Cannes. I wouldn't give him a standing ovation, but I equally wouldn't ban him from ever working ever again, which is what the people who don't seem to like him want to do. It's like, well, if you don't like Johnny Depp, don't watch his films. But equally, I would not, you know, castigate him or throw sort of, you know, spears at him on the grounds of him being a ghastly misogynist, which is what he's accused of being. Yeah,
I know. I mean, an even worse case. I mean, we are still waiting for Kevin Spacey to be convicted of anything.
Yes.
And it's not merely that he's not getting any more parts. It's that they actually snip his previous performances out of film.
Yes.
You know, it's a madness. It's a terror. People are terrified of offence, and then we should give offence. We should give offence more often, more frequently, and with more bile. I think.
Well, that's my plan. It sometimes works and sometimes doesn't work, but we shall see.